bit bad for the men in the audience. There's too many powerful women here. they're everywhere. And this next year, if it's the year of women in power, well, sorry. But I think there's enough to go around for all of us, and it's really, that's the second part of the boundarylessness that I've talked about before, that I think really in today's world, you know, of course there's some physical differences between men and women, so of course there's some of those drivers that differentiate what we can and cannot do. But those are limited today. Things have changed, and really, I really feel that men and women can easily work side by side, have occupations which are side by side, respect each other and each other's opinions. I think what's nice, a lot of folks have asked me, what was it like to live on the space station with two men? And I wonder if I would have preferred to be up there with just all women. I don't know if I would or not, you know, because that has its difficulties as well, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong. So I think a little diversity with our backgrounds, where we've come from, for all sorts of different things, gender, religion, race, sex, all of that is a wonderful thing that adds to the melting pot, adds to the ideas that we have, that we're productive and interesting people, and then can produce such great things. For example, the one thing that I'm very familiar with is the space station. And I think maybe you want to hear a little bit about my summer adventure, a little bit, maybe. I had just a great time. I'm so thankful for the movie that everybody put together here. It saved me from a little bit of description. Sometimes I'm not so good in public speaking to describe. So I think you've got a real good visual idea of what some of the activities we did to launch, to be on a rocket, fly into space, and come back on the space shuttle, and then be on the space station. While we were up there, we did all sorts of things, from construction work to interior plumbing, electrical work, computer programming work, and then that's all just to keep the space station alive and as it's growing. And then thirdly, of course, it's a laboratory, so we did science experiments while we were up there. We're getting ready to add on a couple other modules from our international partners, a Japanese module and a European module, as well as put on 2 more solar arrays. Right now we have 2 solar arrays which rotate, so they follow the sun, and they can turn, they can gimbal, and they can rotate, so wherever the sun is, even though the space station is flying like a spacecraft, the solar arrays will always be pointing at the sun. And at nighttime they collect power and they go into the batteries that are there, and then the batteries provide us power at night. I think I've mentioned before, just so everyone knows, we're flying at altitude only about 250 miles at 17,500 miles an hour. So there's 16 sunrises and sunsets in one 24-hour period. We keep our time generally on Greenwich Mean Time, so our day is a little bit like that. And so, but sometimes that changes depending on if we have other spacecraft that are coming to visit, because those other spacecraft have to launch from where they were constructed, or where the launch platform is, which is usually in Kazakhstan, Baikonur in Kazakhstan, or Kennedy in Florida. And so sometimes we have to adjust our schedules to accommodate those spacecraft that are going to come up and join us for orbital mechanics. So I can sit here and talk a lot about some of this type of stuff, but I think there's probably some pointed questions that the kids have here, and I think we'd like to address those. I've sent a couple messages, and I'd just like to recap real quickly about my real feelings. I mean, imagine looking at you look at a map, and you see all the countries, and sometimes you have to memorize where all the countries are in geography class, right? And you have to remember all the capitals of the countries, and you get quizzed on this. But I don't mean to say that's a silly thing, but when you see the real world, those lines are not there. Literally, those lines are not there. Sometimes there's mountains, and sometimes there's rivers, and maybe that's one of those boundaries. But that's all you see. You don't see those boundaries that we draw. And so keep that in mind. And along with that are the boundaries of what you think are your limitations and what other people around you think are your limitations. I think that's actually even a bigger factor, is the people who surround you sometimes think that you have limitations because of your gender or your color or your religious beliefs. And you have to put that aside to be bigger than that and know in your heart that you can do anything that you want to do out there. And the third thing that I've tried to have people walk away when I'm talking from what I saw was just a conscientious feeling about your environment. When we were up there, there's just this thin little line of atmosphere which is protecting us. You know, one of the things when we're out in space, on spacecraft, even in spacecraft, we get a pretty big dose of radiation. And we are lucky we have our atmosphere which is protecting us from all of that bad radiation that can obviously lead to medical and health problems down the road. And not to mention the extreme temperatures that are out in space. And the vacuum of space, those are, you know, a given, but there's a whole bunch of other dangers of being in space, and we have this little protective shell that is allowing us to live here. So be conscientious of the environment and help to maintain the environment for generations to come. And the last point that I want to take away, have folks take away with is just about health. You know, I think one of the most important things for kids to think about today is physical fitness and their health. It really is, I think, the only limiter for people to achieve anything they want to achieve if their health is not in good order. And we have every ability to take care of it ourselves. I mean, this is your body. No matter how tall or small or old or young you are, you have all the ability to take care of it, and it really needs to be an important thing in your life, and physical fitness is very important in your lifestyle. So I don't want to bore you with all of my little philosophies, but these are little points that I feel that are really true and were very obvious to me while I was in space. They just obviously came to me, and so I want to share them. I know that there's some extremely knowledgeable, wise folks who have been my mentors who have already known that, of course. My father, as mentioned before, so some men are very good. and Gandhiji, of course, has some of these same philosophies and ideas about life, and I think these are things that we need to follow. So, can we ask for some questions? Sure. Wherever you can start with the question. Okay. It's okay. I think the questions are fine. Yeah.
Thanks, Sunita. I have a lot of questions actually on behalf of the kids sitting in the audience. One of them is, how is your experience so far in India during this trip?
That's a great question. I've been meaning to answer that question actually for the last 2 days, because I've been asked this from some of the reporters. Well, how has my trip been and how has it felt? Well, a little like when I just came up here, every single venue that I've been to has been overwhelming, even when it's just a family visit, just because there's so many family members and people who have took an interest in space. I was mentioning earlier to the President that I think at times in the United States we take space travel for granted. We've done it for a number of years, and people see astronauts periodically. We have the ability to go to different schools in different states. And, you know, particularly living in Houston, Texas, where all of us live and work, you sort of forget about it because it's work. You know, it's like you get up in the morning and you go, and though it's different every day and very exciting, it seems maybe a little bit routine, and you forget that there's a whole bunch of people in the world who don't see this every day. And I am just so appreciative that so many people in India took an interest. I'm so thankful. When I started to hear, my father mentioned to me some of the news clippings that he got for people that were praying for Atlantis to come home safely. And of course, you know, I didn't believe him entirely. I was like, no, I can't really believe it. But I'm really getting the feeling, having been here, how warm and wonderful everybody is, and how much interest there has been in space. And I really appreciate that. You know, I'm just following in the footsteps of other people who have done just amazing things. Of course, Kalpana Chawla, who I'm sure inspired many people throughout India, and I'm just hopefully emulating a little bit of what she has done for people in the world. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Sunita, you spent most of your time in space. What did you miss the most when you were in space about the Earth? I mean, your home or family or whatever.
Right. Well, everybody, even my husband, I can see my father starting to laugh because I know he thinks I'm going to say it's Gorby. But Gorby is my dog. So I really, really miss my dog. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. Of course, I miss my family people, my husband, and all of my family members. But you know, we had a phone up in space, and we were able to call home periodically when the antenna was correct. And we also had email, so we were able to email home and talk to find out how folks were and actually find out the news and stuff like that. But I wasn't able to do that with my dog. So, you know, I miss that little guy so much. And I think also animals really epitomize what's really good and pure about Earth and the planet. You know, when I am with him, I have a good excuse to go to the beach and take him for a swim and feel the ocean breeze, feel the sand. I have a good excuse to go for a walk in the woods with him and to hear the leaves rustling. All that stuff I didn't have when I was up in space, and I think those are some of the only things that I really, really missed.
And Sunita, now that you are back on Earth, what do you miss about space?
I miss everything about space. I miss that I was taller in space. I don't know if you know that too. Your spine expands when you're in space. I was 2 centimeters taller. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I was taller. Maybe I looked a little bit bigger. So that is one of the issues when you come back. That's why people typically have a little bit of a back pain, because all that cartilage between your vertebrae is allowed, it's like a sponge, and it's allowed to stretch. But seriously, I think I just miss floating, and I miss looking back at the Earth. I was mentioning to another crowd earlier, I look at every room differently now, because you look up and you sort of go, wow, if this was in space, we could be all floating around up in here. This is all a whole lot of, not necessarily wasted space, but space that we could be using. Spacecraft look fairly small, but you can use every little part of it because you can be upside down, upside right, sideways, left and right. So there's a whole bunch of new opportunities when you look at places like the ceiling. And I think that leads to a secondary thing that hit me was if you look at a problem, if you're stuck on a problem and you're looking at it only one way, in one direction, you might be stuck on it forever. But if you look at it from another perspective, you might be able to solve it. And so that sort of rang true with the idea of looking at a room like this and going, wow, I wish I could float up there.
Sunita, one of the child asked me a very interesting question. When you're floating in space, do you get that butterfly feeling in your tummy, like, you know, you get it on the roller coaster ride?
Well, floating, no. Floating, actually, no. Floating is very calm. It's very peaceful. When you look out the windows, we have one window that's about this big in the U.S. laboratory, and then a couple that are about this big in the Russian section. And if you put your face real close to it, it looks like you're in a glass-bottom boat. That's what you feel like. So you're looking out as the Earth is transiting below you. I think I got butterflies when we launched. That was the most like a roller coaster ride. Very dynamic. None of us were really nervous when we took off because we had trained for this so well that it didn't really seem like anything out of the ordinary. It seemed like what we trained for. But you don't feel all the dynamics of the vehicle shaking and the G-force on your chest pushing you in. And so all of that didn't necessarily give me butterflies, but was very shocking and definitely felt like a roller coaster ride. And at the end of the roller coaster ride, the added benefit, you took your seatbelt off and all you did was float out of your chair. That was very fun.
Another interesting question is, when you get lonely and bored up there, what do you do? Do you watch TV? Do you play PlayStation? What do you do?
An interesting question. A lot of people ask, and I actually can't think for a moment that I was bored. There's just no way I was ever bored. One of the biggest fun things, of course, we like to do is look out the window. So whenever there's a free moment, I'd be looking out the window. But like I said, we had email, we also had the phone, so you know there was always times that we could be calling home and talking. But there's just a lot to do. Right now we are in the construction, we are like right in the middle of the construction of the space station like I was mentioning, and we have a lot more to go the next couple of years. While the shuttles are flying until 2010, I think every shuttle flight is going to bring up a new piece, and we're going to be adding on, and so it's really quite busy. We're always maintaining the space station as well, or doing experiments, always looking for something to do. There's never a dull moment. But we do have movies, and we don't have the internet. We have pre-recorded TV and movies, like I said. So usually on Friday night, just because it was the end of the week, we would all get together and typically go watch a Russian movie. 8 popcorn balls.
Sunita, one question for you. 50 years before, nobody was dreaming that people can go into space. It was just a dream. Like the same thing, maybe after more 50 years, we all are from trade and industry. What we as a businessmen can think of doing a business on a space after 50 years?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. You know, I think we also take, again, space a little bit for granted, and we don't realize that it's been in the lifetime of some of the people here in the audience that we just started flying in space. And that it's now evolved into something we do fairly regularly. I wouldn't say routinely, because it is still experimental, but fairly regularly. We're actually building a space station. So what are we going to do next? Well, I hope, in the near term, we're going to go back to the moon, build a space station there. And then after that, we'll figure out how hard or difficult it would be to use the moon as a stepping stone, another launch platform, to see how hard or difficult it would be to go to Mars. And whether or not it's really of interest that we really do want to go to Mars. I believe it is. I believe that Mars will give us some ideas of things that could happen to our planet and things that we should watch out for. And so I think it's a really good idea, but we'll have to see how that all pans out. And so those are on the exploration side, but I think from the commercial and business side, I really hope that we have some commercial way, just like airline traffic, that we can get folks into space. Go for an orbit. Just go out for an orbit, 90 minutes of your life after the launch, and come back down. I think if folks saw that boundaryless world that I saw while I was up there, people would be a lot more nice to each other.
Thank you, Sunita. Before I finish with the question-answer round,
can I just pose one question in between?
I'm sorry?
What was the feeling when you took the first flight? Were you really afraid, or just excited, or what was the feeling?
Well, I think the feeling was routine when we got in the vehicle. But before we got in the vehicle, the spacecraft, when you see it sitting on the launch platform, usually before the launch day, we've gone out to the launch pad before. The rocket's sitting there, but there's a structure that's closed on the space shuttle itself, and people are still out there working on it, tinkering away, closing up last-minute things. And so we've been out there before to do that, and it seems like, okay, it's no big deal. But actually, the day that we went out there for the launch, they had fueled the spacecraft. So it's filled up. That big orange tank is filled with cryogenic hydrogen and oxygen. It's really cold. That's why that tank is orange, because it's like a big protective covering, like a neoprene type of covering on top of that. And it's all filled with this very, very cold fluid sitting in metal, which is creaking and breathing and hissing and cracking and moaning. You hear it as you arrive at the launch pad. And there's also only a couple people out there. All of the support structure is cleared away, and you feel like, as you're looking up to this monstrosity, over 200 feet of 7.5 million pounds of thrust, fuel, you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, am I going to get in that thing? What, am I crazy? But once you sit in it, it sort of feels like a simulation again. So that was really the time that I felt scared, was when I first saw this thing all loaded, ready to launch and leave the planet.
One more question on behalf of all the children. Most of the children here, they've come, they are aspiring or wishing or dreaming to become an astronaut. Do you really think it is possible for all these different ages and different sizes of children to dream and make it come true?
I absolutely believe that's true. I mean, that's part of the reason that I wanted to come to India, because I wanted people to realize that I think you see that I'm just a normal person. I'm just like you. There's nothing extraordinary about myself or my background, nothing that anybody here can't do. I don't think of anything that I did was so amazing. I didn't graduate number one in my class. I was in the top percent, but not number one. When I went to college, I had a difficult time in college. I was an athlete in college. I had my own a lot of failures. I had, I had to actually fail a couple courses and change my major to graduate. I didn't really understand the application of some of the math and science that I took when I was in college. I went out of the Naval Academy and then flew helicopters, but of course first I wanted to fly jets, but didn't get those. I got helicopters. And then I went to test pilot school and thinking, you know, I'm just a helicopter pilot, I'll never be an astronaut. Went to Johnson Space Center, and it took somebody to tell me that, yeah, why not? Why don't you think you can do it? It was John Young, who had been to the moon a couple times, flew the first space shuttle, said he had to learn how to fly helicopters to land on the moon. And I thought, wow, well, you know, the only person who's telling me I'm not going to be an astronaut is me. I'm setting my own limitations. So I don't see why anybody here couldn't become an astronaut. And there's just this path that you lead that may, sometimes you might have to deviate and do something that you don't find comfortable. I loved animals when I was growing up, so I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. That all didn't work out, so other doors were opened as I joined the Navy, and lo and behold, here I am. So you have to sometimes venture out and say, I don't really know that, but maybe I'll be good at that. I'll give you one more example of that. One of my really good friends in the astronaut office has her chemistry PhD. And the reason she has her chemistry PhD is because she failed undergrad chemistry class. So she thought, I want to learn chemistry, and so I'm going to get my chemistry PhD because I'm so aggravated, I'm so mad at myself. So she challenged herself that I failed an undergrad chemistry course, so I'm getting my PhD. And so, you know, those are, like, again, it's just an example of limitations or risks that you will have to take yourself, and you'll find that there's really the gold pot at the end. You just have to interpret it the right way.
Maybe the last question before the end. What is your real message to all these children? What should they do to dream and make it true?
Well, I think the biggest message is has to do with your going past your own limitations. I don't think there's anybody out here who can't do what they want to do, and why they would ever think otherwise. You know, I think there's a generation out here that needs to take my place. I'm getting older. We need astronauts to continue on exploration. We need folks to help engineer these new spacecraft. We need folks to understand what happens to humans after they've lived for a long time in space. We need folks in science and engineering, science, math, and engineering out there to further our own understanding of ourselves and of our planet. And I challenge you guys to take that to heart and surpass all the records that I have. The records I have are just a matter of happenstance and time, and I think there's opportunities out there for all of you to surpass me, for sure.
Thank you very much, Sunita. I'd like to request our Honorary Secretary, Sri Natubhai Patel, to deliver the vote of thanks.